very pleasant good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Morning Briefing right here on NoFilter.net, Caffeine TV, and all the other platforms that carry the show. Very happy to have you along for the ride. I'm Jeff DeForest, and that man right there, Mr. Success, Mr. Winner, Mr. 4-0 1 week, split the 2 games last week, still 5-1, not too bad over the last 6 ball games. That would be the kind of stuff that would have any handicapper or scamdy capper, I guess would be beating their chest like Tarzan. Oh, yeah, 5-1 over the last 6 games, so that's good. I'm a far cry from that. I like the fact that you lowered your chair a little bit, although it doesn't seem like it's all the way down. Yeah, seems like you're standing on a soapbox. But yesterday it was like doing this show with Victor Wembanyama as my partner. I was waiting for you to slam dunk from the free throw line without taking a step or a dribble. It's quite the piece of comedy there in terms of size, a little Laurel and Hardy-esque. But good to be with you guys today. Everybody's asking me, I don't know how it is with you, Lubie. It's kind of like the whole deal with the station pool whenever you'd have the office pool around the NCAA tournament. We're working in radio. We were essentially a 2-man sports department for the last 14 years that we were doing terrestrial radio at 940 Winds in Miami. And that I really did go left to right across the radio dial here in South Florida. I think it was about 8 stations overall, and covered just about every number, the 5s, the 6s, the 7s, the 8s, the 9s, all the way into the only station I didn't work on was that airport information station that you could never find if your life depended on it. Yes, for more information about flights, turn to 1760. You're like, what? That's just outside in South Florida. That's just outside what would be considered Havana in terms of radio. I think Radio Marti and Radio Free Europe were channels that were more prominent and more in the center of the dial. But yeah, people, had always expected the guys in the sports department, and you know how this goes. I mean, we're supposed to know more about college basketball than, say, not to demean or sound sexist, but the cleaning ladies, some of the secretaries, some of the people that work in the office, the financial people. There were some guys there that, were sending it in with both fists. Usually the sales department was a bunch of degenerate gamblers. Did you ever notice that?
Yes.
Sales department, and the general manager often was a guy that was betting with both fists as well. But we would routinely finish last in the college basketball pool, and everybody go, "Oh, I thought you guys knew something about sports." And that's kind of how I feel about everybody coming up to me. I don't know how many times you've answered this question so far since the matchup was set. Who do you like in the Super Bowl? Which, who do I like? It's kind of a coin flip game, is it not? I mean, if you look at the facts surrounding it, the past performances, San Francisco gets a bye. Then it looked like they were getting knocked out by all rights. Everybody thought Green Bay should have won that ball game. But for a couple of bozoic decisions by Dan Campbell, in spite of the collapse in the second half, think about it, and you can never necessarily make a definitive judgment about this, but you take 6 points off the board, you look at the result of the ball game, San Francisco wins by 3. Those 6 points loomed rather large, did they not, Mr. Campbell, as he continues to try to justify some of the dumbest decision-making in sports history? You have to sort of scale it back a little bit and play the situation a little more. It is a championship game. You have a chance to go to the Super Bowl for the first time in franchise history, conference championship game for the first time since 1991. Opportunity to win a title for Detroit, the blue-collar, hardworking people on the assembly lines of Detroit, looking very much forward to their first championship since 1957. The Sputnik was being launched, for God's sake. And instead, this guy has to play bravado again, beating his chest like a scamdy capper and saying, you know what, I went for it all season. I'm going to do it again, no matter how stupid it is at the time. And I like Dan Campbell. I like what he's done there in Detroit. Very embraceable. I was all in on Detroit possibly winning that game. We did take the 7 points in that one. And, you were thinking, wow, a very representative effort. But when you have every opportunity to win the ball game, I don't know. What does that tell you about San Francisco? Brock Purdy, the most maligned quarterback in the Final Four there, acquitted himself better than probably anybody, with the exception of maybe Patrick Mahomes. I mean, he was right there with him. So maybe it's appropriate that these two teams are matching up. And yet, Kansas City, what did they do to get to this spot? They annihilated the Dolphins in sub-zero temperatures at home, then went on the road, beat the Buffalo Bills, who everybody was touting as the hottest team, and Josh Allen, once again, he had to pry Chris Collinsworth's lips off a certain appendage just to be able to make his way out of the tunnel. My God. You talk about a suck-up job, Collinsworth, and just about everybody else was talking about Josh Allen as if he was the second coming of Joe Montana. which he's good, but also is error prone and prone to long lapses of inconsistency. So, was it a big surprise that Kansas City won on the road there in Buffalo? Not necessarily. What was surprising was the way that their defense handled the Baltimore Ravens, and that was a work of art by Steve Spagnuolo, who is among the top regarded defensive coordinators in the league, has been for some time, and yet as a head coach, one of those guys. Maybe a great coordinator, maybe not a great head coach, but nonetheless, he's landed in a good spot for him. And Kansas City's defense has never been this good over the course of time that they've been a dominant team. This clearly represents the best defense they have. So where does that lead us, Lubie? Does that lead us to any kind of conclusion that we can embrace and actually back up with our own money? You 6-1 or 5-1 in the last 2 weeks. Me, a very modest 3-3. So all I'm doing is having people eat up the juice, Lubie. So I'm going to let you go ahead and render your opinion here first. And let's face it, it's preliminary. But the line is moving slightly. It's going back and forth a little bit. I saw it 2.5 originally, favor of the San Francisco 49ers. Dropped back all the way down, I think, to 1.5. And today I saw it posted at 2, although I am going by yesterday's news tomorrow as I'm getting my lines out of the Bulldog edition of the New York Post that's delivered here in South Florida, where I guess you would have to think that there might have been an amendment to that. But what do you think? I mean, on past performances in the postseason so far, could you not make a better case for Kansas City than you can for San Francisco, who many people, including a certain heavy gambler that we know very well, who dropped 110,000 to win 100,000 on the 49ers, laying 7 points he had it at. And he's come right back. He's sending it in again. I saw a ticket that he posted the other day on social media, put another 110,000 to win 100 on San Francisco. And in this case, he got some kind of a deal. I guess his casino host finally said, hey, give the man a break. He's getting buried. And he has San Francisco laying 1 in this game, laying 1. So let's go with the 2-point line. And what do you think on a preliminary basis? I know we've been discussing this every day.
I thought we're supposed to have a moratorium.
I can't dodge the question, though. Everybody that comes up to me thinks I was at that business meeting yesterday. There's 5 guys. Hey, who do you like in a Super Bowl? Who do you like in a Super Bowl? I'm like, I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead probably and take a shot with the Chiefs, but I'm doing that lacking completely in confidence that I'm on the right side. And I do believe that it's a coin flip. Going to be dependent on who gets some breaks and, which team happens to come out there and as our good friend Tony Segreto would say, both of these teams capable of seizing the moment. I don't think either of them are going to fold up and throw the flowers in the punch. But I'm thinking that Kansas City's defense is going to give problems to Brock Purdy if they were able to minimize what Lamar Jackson was doing in that game. And their offense should be able to score because we saw Green Bay just running up and down the field in San Francisco. And Detroit essentially did the same thing until they fell into a coffin in the second half.
I'm leaning San Francisco just based off of the talent on the rosters. Like the Niners, the Chiefs defense played its best game. And look, it was good all year statistically, but if you watch them, they had their holes until they played arguably the best team in football, and they played their best game possibly all year. I mean, their defense Spagnuolo put together a great game plan, and Lamar Jackson looked like the guy we've seen in the playoffs before, and he hadn't looked like that all year. He hadn't looked like that in their one playoff game this year. So I'm not writing off the Chiefs, which I didn't last week either. I thought the Ravens would win, but I figured it would be a game. I'm leaning Niners just because whatever the Chiefs have on defense, the Niners have more talent. The Niners defense is loaded. It's just, you're not wrong. They were playing the last 2 months before the second half versus the Lions. They were playing very average football, their defense. Bosa did not look like an all-pro. He looked like a nice pro bowler, but not an all-pro. Chase Young, who was supposedly this amazing acquisition, was doing nothing. They were banged up in the linebacking core, and that's one of their strong suits. They're playing very average football. But then they played like they played versus the Lions, right? They woke up. Dan Campbell woke up a sleeping giant, went for that 4th and 3. The defense got the stop, and from that point on, the defense was night and day. The Lions were like, oh, shit, we're playing the Niners. The Niners that were this scary team heading into the conference championship last year until Brock Purdy got hurt. That's what they look like. Off of that, to me, they're the better team. I mean, they're freaking. That's why Purdy doesn't matter, because they're so fucking loaded on both sides of the ball that even Kyle Shanahan can't fuck it up in a big game. but it is still Kyle Shanahan in a big game. It is Brock Purdy in the big game. versus Andy Reid, who is the best coach now with Belichick out of the game right now, and Patrick Mahomes, who is the best player in the game, who's won 2 Super Bowls out of 3, who's been to now 3. This is now his 4th Super Bowl appearance in like 6 years being a quarterback. Even Brady didn't do that. Like, so I get the not betting against Mahomes, Andy Reid in this, because that is not only the better quarterback coaching duo, it's the vastly better. Even when the Chiefs or Eagles have lost in a Super Bowl under Andy Reid, they didn't lose because of him. Like, it was Donovan McNabb throwing up late in the game versus the Patriots when the Eagles had a chance to steal a Super Bowl away from the Patriots. It's the Chiefs' entire offensive line being hurt so the Bucs can run through the Chiefs and make Mahomes look like a little kid. Otherwise, Andy Reid hasn't cost them anything. Kyle Shanahan's cost both big games he's been in, both Super Bowls, where there's an offensive coordinator under a defensive head coach, so you knew it was his calls, in the greatest comeback in Super Bowl history, or
maybe the greatest collapse in Super Bowl history.
Greatest collapse, exactly.
I like it, yeah.
The Super Bowl, what was it, down here, when the Niners were up the entire game, they were up by double digits in the 4th quarter, and he puts the ball in Jimmy G's hand instead of running the fucking ball and milking the clock, and the defense, which was on fire, and they get an interception. Mahomes gets the ball, and the Chiefs somehow win by double digits. Like, I get logic going with the Chiefs. Something tells me the Niners have been knocking on this door for 3 or 4 years, and Shanahan realizes, okay, I can't fuck up another big game, or this will for sure be my moniker. So I'm leaning.
I think guys that have a tendency to do that just go ahead and make the same mistakes all over.
That's the problem. That you're not wrong. That's only Wednesday. Remember, only Wednesday.
We have like 12 days to figure this out.
I'm not. This is not my play. This is where I'm leaning on Wednesday.
No, it makes sense. I mean, I don't know how to answer the question right now. Everything you say, you're thinking about Deebo Samuel and McCaffrey and. All of the
Kittle woke up.
I mean, all of these guys that
Ayuk is great.
Well, and Purdy has made some big plays in clutch moments, in spite of the fact that his team was getting cremated throughout most of the ball game between the San Francisco 49ers and the Packers, and then subsequently, I mean, they're down 24-7 at halftime to the Detroit Lions, who didn't look like world beaters. I know they won 12 games and won their division, and it was a great story. It was real Cinderella Man type of stuff. And everybody was in love with Dan Campbell until he reverted back, like you're talking about with Shanahan, to being Dan Campbell. And said, I'm not going to change anything here. This is how we got here. Dance with the girl you brung. And then you're thinking, yeah, but that didn't work here. I mean, you have to be able to play the scoreboard and the time and all of these other things, especially in a game of that magnitude. Yeah. And that's where these guys, as you're referring to with many examples, Shanahan has choked up. All right, so we don't have a pick there necessarily, but you're leaning San Francisco. I'm leaning Kansas City, which is typical of the show because one of us then has to be right. Which is good. This way, listen, people, if you watch the morning briefing, you got a winner from somebody. There are only 2 choices, and we made them both. that provides a lot of clarity for people out there. I mean, that's why we're here. That's why we're making the big money. All right, a couple of other things. Tyrell Hatton, I don't know how significant you think this is. I'm not sure if it's significant at all. But the latest defector, John Rahm, of course, was the big story there, $300 million to sign up with the Saudis and take the sports washing money and sell his soul, so to speak, if that's even the case anymore. It seems like everybody's giving this the thumbs up after the PGA players who were staunch supporters. I mean, talking about Rory McIlroy, he was as vocal as anybody about, oh, well, we can't have this. We got to stick to the PGA Tour. This is the tour. It's the best players. It's got the tradition and all of this other stuff. And now he's saying, as you might say, Lubie, fuck it. He hasn't defected. Tyrell Hatton, I don't know how significant of a loss he is. He's a very competent player. I've bet money on him a few times and actually been successful. But nonetheless, he goes for like $65 million to the Live Tour. What exactly is the Live Tour at this stage? What the fuck is it? Now, McIlroy is advocating for Live Tour players to be eligible to play on a PGA Tour because nobody can figure out what is what now. Now, I'm looking at the Live Tour and thinking it's in spite of the big names and the splash they've made and the money that they've laid out there, how can they make any money on this thing? First of all, I guess that's not the intention. And I don't know if the intent was just to ruin the PGA Tour and the game of golf as we knew it in terms of its structure, which was very important. It was very much like the steroid era in baseball, wiped out, just obliterated all of these statistics that were so precious. so integral in watching and being a baseball fan that those numbers went askew. I mean, they went right out the window. They went crazy. So, when we were talking about that Hall of Fame thing last week, I mean, how can you say? You just don't know. The game was entirely different. And I think this has been a game changer for the PGA, which the PGA players have every right, as I said, to just be absolutely fuming with John Monahan and the way that he said, well, you guys have to stick with me. And the next day he's, wearing a turban on his head and he's riding a camel in the middle of the Mojave. I mean, come on. It was crazy. Well, you know what? I want to get a feeling for the culture here. But nonetheless, so he defects. I'm trying to figure out what it is. Do they still have the TV contract with the CW here in the United States? The CW, which you're more likely to see Barnaby Jones trying to track down some criminal than you are to see a golf tournament on there. Where are they today? Well, here we are in Mexico. Don't understand the concept. The whole team play thing is kind of literally foreign to me. I'm not sure that I really need that in golf because who are the teams? It's not like you have the Yankees and the Tigers and the Red Sox. You got teams that are made up of four guys that don't even like each other. And they're arbitrarily playing. They're not playing together as a team. They're not playing other teams head to head. It's just some cockamamie thing that they started, like the modified Stableford scoring system. But the CW, and it was crazy, right? Did you watch a lot of Barnaby Jones? What always amazed me about Buddy Ebsen, who was, of course, Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies, and was best known for that. I guess he got blackballed by Hollywood for some reason. But when he was Barnaby Jones, here's this 90-year-old guy that looks like he's in worse shape, physically than Joe Biden is, and maybe even Donald Trump, who keeps campaigning on the fact that we need to get a youth movement going in the White House, and he's like 3 years younger at 70.
Yes.
The senile old Joe Biden. Not exactly, do the math here, Donnie. Figure it out. You are an old man. I'm an old guy. And this guy, he's older than me. And plus, if he goes 215, then I must be weighing in at about 165
like 140.
Right now. So, but what is it? And Barnaby Jones was great because he would chase down some sprinter like Ben Johnson, juice and all. Johnson still had the needle in his flank. And somehow Barnaby Jones would, outfox him by sprinting to the corner. And then he'd get there first and trip the guy up and arrest him. So, a kind of an unfathomable concept for that show. Yet it brought up the whole idea of Ben Johnson, now the offensive coordinator with the Detroit Lions, who's going to stay there. He was asking for $15 million a year. That's the story, to become a head coach of the Commanders. It's the highest paid salary in the NFL among coaches. It would have had to have been Belichick, no? Last year. $15 million? It's a lot of money for a guy that hadn't been a head coach before. The guy's 37 years old. Maybe he didn't really want to leave the Detroit
Belichick was making 20.
Oh, 20.
He gets to come out of retirement, getting 18. Carroll was making, but these are all guys that have won. Carroll 15, McVay 14, Tomlin 12 and a half. Like literally every guy I just named all won a Super Bowl.
So that seemed like a pretty lofty demand there for a guy that he's distinguished himself as an offensive coordinator, no doubt about it. Remember when Dan Campbell was jumping up and down because they got that guy Jahmyr Gibbs and nobody takes a running back in the first round highly in the first round anymore. That turned out to be pretty fortuitous. So we were all laughing at that guy and mocking him. Johnson made good use of all of these players and turned them into a high-scoring sort of juggernaut offense where they were averaging over 27 points a game in a year where it seemed like points were really down in the National Football League. Those over-under totals were often in the low 40s for just about every game on the board. So, yes, would it be significant to have a guy that could bring these sort of blue-collar guys around to 27.5 points a game with Jared Goff at quarterback? It might be something to look into, but apparently his demands were too high. At least that's the way the story goes. And so he's back to being an offensive coordinator coming back with the Lions, which will they struggle next year to match what they did this year? Or do they use that loss in the national conference game, national foot conference championship game? Did they use that as a springboard for more success?
I look at a team like the Bills and I can see them going backwards.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot of free agents and they're super capped out. The Lions are the opposite. They're super young. So they should have actually a lot of money where if they want to go spend on free agents, they can. And they've done a really good job in the draft. They should be better. My only problem is Campbell. I don't trust him at all. I think he's shown he's not the one coaching this team. Their coordinators are, and he's the one motivating them. But again, we've seen those guys like Eddie O. Those guys eventually get in their own way. Like at some point, the coach has to be X's and O'ing it. And I don't think he's doing any of that. I think the bravado bullshit reared its ugly head at the most important time. And that's the only thing I see holding them back. Their GM's great. Coordinators are great. Is Campbell. I don't know if he's really the guy that's going to make them a Super Bowl champion. I think he's always going to get out-coached by the better. I think the other great coach is going to out-coach him every fucking time. But I think in the regular season, they're going to be very similar, if not better. They have a lot of talent, and they're very young.
There you go. We haven't even figured out the Super Bowl yet. We're already speculating about next year.
I can do that.
You want to go through a mock draft while we're at it? That's always good for some filler during the NFL offseason in the early stages. All right, I watched a little college basketball last night. A couple of upsets took place. North Carolina went down, and Tennessee also was upset last night. I watched a lot of our friend Jim Larinaga coaching the University of Miami. They were on the road against NC State. I hadn't really been keeping track of them that closely. They went into that game at 14-6, 5-4 in a very, very competitive ACC. 5-4 has you near the bottom of the ACC right now. They have some very difficult challenges coming up. So it's interesting to see a team that was in the Final Four last year that supposedly made some improvements and brought back a lot of the talent that got them to the Final Four. Suddenly struggling a little bit now at 14-7 and 5-5 in the conference. FAU, I believe, has rallied now. I think they've won 6 in a row, the other Final Four team from South Florida. After kind of struggling a little bit at times, they found themselves in an upside-down position in many games against what you would figure to be lesser competition. They were supposed to be great this year, Lubie. Remember all the speculation? They were ranked in the top 10, I think, before the season started, and they brought back all but one of their significant players, but changed conferences, and it seems to have been a little bit of an impediment to them continuing to streak and light the world up as a school that came out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, to make it all the way to the Final Four. So Dusty may have things going on the right track finally, although every time I tune in a game, they seem to be behind, midway through the fourth quarter. So not sure they make it back. They're ranked, I think, 23rd in the country. But interesting developments all across the board. It's time to start following that a little bit more closely, Louie, especially if you're going to win the office pool here at nofilter.net. All right, we have to run. A lot of fun being with you. Thanks so much for joining us here for today's edition of the Morning Briefing. For Victor Wembanyama with the high chair, you look a little more level here today, Louie. Man, we can actually see the stuff on the top shelf, that Mitch Albom book and the basketball. It's signed by, is that...
there's a Brandon Nightball and there's a Miami.
Oh, the Brandon Nightball, yeah, okay.
2007.
Very good. I'm probably the only guy that has a picture in the background of Ladislao Mijangos. My wife hung that up in the background there. I saw it was in the camera shot, and you're saying, who the fuck is that? And he is the former Mexican heavyweight champion. I called one of his fights many years ago, and they opened up Casino Magic. They kicked it off with a boxing match, and they fought Hercules Mike Weaver. Remember Mike Weaver? Had that one sensational knockout over Big John Tate. He was losing every second of every round to the 15th round. They used to go 15 back then in title fights. And sure enough, one punch, he knocked out Big John Tate with like 2 seconds to go in the fight. Big John Tate from Knoxville, Tennessee, the former Olympic champion. And that was his claim to fame. After that, he kind of flamed out. And I believe he was one of those guys like George Foreman that had a bunch of kids and he named them all Mike. Kind of a strange Antonio Cromartie type of thing. All right, we have to run. Thanks so much for being with us. For Mike Lubie, a.k.a. Victor Wembanyama, I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the next edition of the Morning Briefing.